Ladies and gentlemen, he spoke first, so we'll introduce him first. It's Howard Mackie.
Hey. I guess I should clap for you, too.
Yeah, I guess so.
Then we've got Terry Kavanagh, another great Spider-Man writer. Wonderful artist and writer, Dan Jurgens. And the dean of this group, and I mean that with all the due respect, the man who killed Gwen Stacy, everybody. Blame him. Blame Gerry Conway.
No, that wasn't just a comic book.
Yeah, he literally, sadly, he's still on the lam. So that's why he moved out west and everything.
Nobody sees you.
Oh, certainly. Is it booming? You're awesome. Exactly. I consider myself the luckiest man. Lou Gehrig reference completely over the heads of our young audience. Yeah, thank you, Howard. Absolutely. Guys, and truly, I want to go down the line because one of the things I've always loved about Marvel in particular, DC did it with Superman, especially in the Mort Weisinger years, but I always felt that in that Marvel age of the last 60 years, not only were they telling great stories and elevating the medium, but also reflecting on pop culture things of the moment. And I wonder, I mean, really, even, Howard, even, going into the early aughts and stuff, I'm sure, Spider-Man was drinking Zima or on a skateboard or something,
Spider-Man never would have been.
Peter Parker sneaking one from Aunt May and stuff. But yeah, are there any weird kind of cultural moments of the moment and everything that you popped in the book?
I'd like to defer to
you want to think about that?
To start with.
Oh yeah, sure.
That's okay.
Oh no, hey man, let's start with the 70s. I'm all for it.
I think
I was trying to think. I can't. Dune buggies were a thing, and we did it.
Spider buggy.
Spider buggy. Yeah.
Sure, absolutely.
So that was probably a reference. We were.
Although I don't think they were ever a thing.
No. There was a moment, where you'd see people talking about them. No, I don't. I'm sure there are lots of references in there, but we were swimming in like fishes in the sea, and you only look back later and say, "Wow, that was really culturally relevant, and now really dead."
Exactly. Yeah.
So
No.
it's hard to say.
Funny. Dan, anything come to mind?
No, not really.
I stumped the panel.
I mean, part of it is, to a certain extent, you try almost to avoid being too on the mark that way. You want to pick something that isn't going to be dead in 6 months when the book comes out.
True.
And half the time you're going to miss on that. So you just kind of try and float around the generalities of it all.
Okay. All right. And Terry, is that your answer, basically?
What he said. I mean, we tried to avoid cell phones for a while because that might have been a dated thing.
Sure.
Yeah. So
Crazy.
Also, I'm so pleased I don't write Spider-Man comic books in the age of cell phones because it makes everything way too easy. But to answer your original question, yes, I do have one because it was forced upon me. I will not mention the editor's name, even though he's here sitting two seats down from me. You guys can figure it out.
It's Bob Budiansky.
I didn't say it. But virtual reality was becoming a thing. And it is one of my least favorite comics to sign. So please, everybody go rush out and get a copy of that and come to my table and get me to sign it. There's a cover, it's called VR Spider-Man, I think. And it's literally Spider-Man. I think it was in the hoodie sweatshirt, swinging out at the camera, holding two Uzis.
Oh, jeez. Remember that?
Yes.
Wow. They were virtual.
Well, that's it. They were virtual reality Uzis, so that made it better. It is really just kind of an amongst many embarrassing points in my personal and professional life. It's really up there. I sometimes have to say to people, how about if I pay you for me not to sign this one?
Just buy the comic from them.
Yeah.
Well, I apologize for the sore subject then.
Yes.
And also, obviously, the great thing is, and I would imagine, and you guys can correct me, but given the body of work that preceded your runs, all of you, including Gerry, the fun is creating new adversaries for Spider-Man, new characters and stuff. So starting with Gerry, I mean, obviously, there's a million that we could mention, and I'm sure we will, but, any particular, I'm really glad I made that character, and I'm so glad it's still around or whatever.
Well, yeah, I mean, obviously, the Punisher is the big one, but I really enjoyed making characters that were more street level,
Okay.
than the big overpowered characters that came later.
Sure. Can I trouble you, Jared, to like get in the mic there a little
sure.
bit more?
Never sure how close I should
I'm sorry,
be.
Dan, and you have to share. Yeah, exactly.
Characters like
Terry.
Tombstone was one of my favorites.
Yes.
Hammerhead. I tried to go for the Dick Tracy kind of characters.
Absolutely.
And then there were, misfires like the Grizzly. So, you're
Grizzly
always
fans?
going, from strength to weakness and back again.
Was the kangaroo yours?
Yeah, well, no. I'd like to say not.
Oh, we're going to Google that and
Exactly.
we'll find out
You know,
if we get
now we
you.
unfortunately-
Animal villains became a thing towards the end of Stan's run, and I got to write the second part of the Gibbon story. Because and I asked, where did this come from? This character? Well, Stan went to a zoo, and he saw a gibbon. He thought that would make a cool villain. Sometimes you're wrong. So yeah, it was a lot of fun to do that, and to create supporting characters too was always fun.
Yeah. Dan?
I don't think any of the characters that I really created are being used or anything. I just, part of it is new characters have to be developed, and I wasn't around long enough to really develop them, so it just didn't take off.
How about
What
it, Terry?
he said again.
Yeah, really?
Although
Okay.
Nightwatch was a character I created
Yes.
that I was sort of proud of. He's not really around anymore, and I think a lot of
Time for a
bad
revival.
stuff was done to him along the way after
Okay.
me. But that was one, and then it was Sandstorm, I think, was a villain I created, but it was another version of Sandman, really.
Sure.
Just
No, I
with
see.
maybe a better name.
Yeah, really. What do you think, Howard?
I run into this situation all the time where I'm contacted by, to do podcasts, or back when they were bringing back the Marvel Handbook, and they'd contact me and say, hey, Howard, you created such and such character. We want to know what college they went to or what their wife's maiden name was.
Backstory, yeah.
And I say, oh, really? I created that character? And so I literally never remember. But I think to the beginning part of your question, and I think I'm just going to fall down on the sword for Terry and I right now, talk about coming in, creating new or newish characters after those who went before us. Of course, Terry specifically.
He's rolling his eyes, everybody.
When we were tasked with coming up with...
I've been trying to avoid saying these words, Howard.
I understand
Don't say
that.
the name.
Yeah.
Don't say the name.
The Clone Saga.
Well, we were going to get into it.
Yeah,
I know. I'm sorry,
I'm
Terry.
putting it out on the table. I mean, we're sitting here with I mean, we can't just blame Gerry.
Yeah, he blames me, I blame Gerry.
Yeah, okay.
And you might as well just blame your parents. That's what most people do.
So, I mean, so we were, because we were tasked with coming up with the next big idea for
Sure.
Spider-Man, and Terry called me, and I said, no, Terry, no, don't do that. No.
Lies. Complete lies.
No, that would be horrible. And I said, I don't even remember this story at all. And Terry acted it all out over the phone, which was really embarrassing.
And I might have cried a
Yes,
little
he
during
did.
it. was
He
a very
did.
emotional story
It was
for
very
me.
moving. He loved the story. And so I said, okay, fine. I think this will be a big misstep, Terry. But that's
Hilarious.
how the Clone Saga came to me.
No,
I got to talk
no.
first, so
But Terry, feel better that the love for Ben Reilly in the last 10 years
Yes.
has been incredible. Yeah, man. And Gerry, honestly, you did the originals,
yes.
the Spider clone.
The weirdest thing is people coming up to me, talking to me about like, oh, I love that you created Ben Reilly. I'm like, I'm not really sure I did. It's like I did an issue with a character that was a clone, but that's about it.
Can I just say thank you, Terry? Because Yeah, Gerry, because Terry and I have had this discussion quite frankly. I said, well, no, he was the inspiration for what we did, but I mean, 'cause to the rest of your question, we did co-create.
I keep trying to share the credit with you every time it comes up. No, I honestly do.
When you say credit, you mean blame?
Well, that process of me trying to share with you was when I was getting blamed, to be honest. But I'm continuing it into now that the character's come into its own again. But I keep saying we can't forget that, because that was the inspiration.
It definitely was the inspiration.
And Howard says, yeah, just forget it.
Yeah, I mean, Gerry who? I said Gerry who?
Well, somebody asked me, where did you come up, why did you come up, or the typical why did you or how did you come up with the idea for, and I said, well, I was trying to solve a story problem. That was it,
Right.
We had a story where I had to bring back Gwen Stacy. I didn't want to bring back Gwen Stacy, so we created this clone thing, and then I thought, well, you got to finish that off somehow. And you finish it off with Spider-Man fighting his clone. And
100%.
Yeah.
That was it.
No, but what resonated with me at the time was it was two good people in a bad situation. Since
Right.
It was a clone of Spider-Man.
Sure.
That's what I remember as a kid thinking was so interesting, and the ambiguity at the end left it open for us later on when I have a little different memory of than Howard does.
He's old, so take everything with a grain of salt. Go ahead.
He's older. But Howard seems to recall that we were tasked with coming up with something in response to the death of Superman, which I don't really remember. To me, it was that we were in this situation where we had aged Peter Parker. We had married him. He had a great job. He lived in a penthouse apartment. His problem was now paying the mortgage instead of doing his homework and all the stuff that we wanted our audience to be able to identify with. And that is what led me to remember that story and the ambiguity of that and say, oh, well, maybe we can organically, we didn't want to have Peter and Mary Jane get divorced because that would be more baggage on top. But it was, like you just said, it was solving a story problem.
Exactly.
And in this case, it was a character problem.
And
really.
just so you know, our two memories are not mutually exclusive. I think it was both those things.
Okay. Well, no one told me we were addressing the death.
Well, no, we didn't talk to you about many things, so yeah.
And also, not just Gerry's original story, but I remember in the original run of What If that they re-examined it, and the clone thinking he was the original kind of puts Peter in stasis, and he took over until he did, and it was all solved in the one issue. But no, really, man. I mean, and also
It was all solved in one issue.
We managed to drag it out for 4 years, so.
hey, man, and a lot of that I know is editorial. Saying, hey, let's keep milking the cow. And it's like, cow's going to run out of milk. No, keep milking the cow.
I have the original notes for the Clone Saga, the first meeting. I still have the notebook, and we had mapped it out for 3 months. The story was to last because we had 4 titles.
Right.
And we thought 4 titles,
12
3
issues.
months, that's 12 issues. That's a solid year's worth of stories.
Absolutely.
And we got towards that last month, and marketing had taken over Marvel and said, oh no, this is doing well, keep going. I remember saying at one point to somebody, you do know how story works. There's a beginning, a middle, and guess what happens? There's an end.
And
we were
honestly,
given no
the
choice.
marketing department did not know how story works.
No, they didn't. Yeah, that was
that's
foolish of me
I
to
don't
have
know why
asked.
you even
Yeah.
tried that.
No, I get it, absolutely. And this is why I love British television. They'll be like, no, we have a 6-episode story. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
And I love the original Life on Mars from British TV. And I even on the commentaries, one of the producers is like, listen, we're not going to do Quantum Leap. The guy's in a coma. He can't be in a 5-year coma. And I love Quantum Leap, don't get me wrong. But yeah, I mean, so no. I also think that thankfully, because of and again, no fault of you guys, but the mistakes in marketing of milking an event too far, I think they've wised up and, 5 issues, not even 6 issues anymore, 5 issues. Well, let's move on to happier subjects.
Oh, yeah, thank God.
Give me a story. I'll start with Howard and move down, but give me your favorite character, villain, supporting character, whatever. Who was beyond Peter himself? Who did you enjoy writing?
Well, as a matter of fact, today it came up several times at my table. Several fans came up with Spider-Man number 75 that I wrote, and it was the conclusion of a confrontation between Norman Osborn and Peter. And just to note, prior to that, I was in an editorial meeting with the editor-in-chief, and and the editor, and when bringing Norman back was brought up, I said, absolutely not. This is, aside from Mary Jane, this is a death that should never, what's that?
Gwen.
Oh, yeah,
I'm sorry, Gwen. Yeah, thank you. Yes, aside from the death of Gwen, this is a death that should
Matter.
And bringing him back undoes that. And I was overruled. So either I was going to write Norman into the book or I was going to stop writing the book. And I decided to try. And I wound up loving writing Norman. My approach to it was that this was never going to be about Spider-Man and the Green Goblin. This was about exploring the relationship between Peter and Norman, and this kind of odd, twisted father-son relationship that they had. And it's especially since it came towards the end of the Clone Saga. I sometimes have trouble going back and looking at my own work from a certain period, or looking at my own work at all. But I'm actually, after talking to several fans, I don't know if they're here today, or tonight or not, I think I'm going to go back and reread that issue because it seems to have had an impact on a lot of people. So
There you go.
Yeah.
How about it, Terry?
For me, it probably was Ben Reilly, because you had given us a blank slate, or effectively a blank slate, but we knew certain aspects. We knew there'd be limits, whatever Peter Parker's were, but he had lived a different life by the time we revisited the character, so we could use that to explore an alternate Peter Parker, sort of. And the fun for me was the collaborative aspect of it, of we were all creating this character together, and it was the artists and the writers, and it was a group of us, and it was an excuse to talk to Howard on the phone at 2:30 in the morning.
yes,
all
because
the
we
time.
need that excuse.
Yeah, yeah.
How about it, Dan?
I was also going to say Ben, mostly just because by the time I got involved with that, I think the books had really strayed quite a bit from what the dictates of Spider-Man were, and that's why they wanted to bring in Ben Reilly, because, Peter Parker was probably never the type of person slated to marry a supermodel. I mean, if you're fighting a villain and your biggest problem is getting Aunt May's prescription home to her because you have it jammed in your hip pocket or whatever, ending up with Christy Brinkley probably wasn't where the Spider-Man story was supposed to go. So to be able to write Ben, which was free of all of that baggage, I thought was a lot of fun. And I had a good time with it for 6 months until I didn't. And rather than do what they said, I said, I'll see you later. Had other things to go do.
Understood.
Yep.
Absolutely. Favorite characters here?
Well, I guess Mary Jane was my favorite supporting character to write. But the most fun character to write was J. Jonah Jameson, who just, you could never go too far with J. Jonah.
Yeah.
And at the same time, there was an interesting subtext to him that, I like to at least recognize, that on some level, he wanted to be, a good journalist, but he just could not help himself when it came to this one mania. So yeah, those were I think the main characters I really enjoyed.
That's awesome. I feel like I'm doing a 12-step program for the Spider Clone survivors. So yeah, this is like an end game when Cap and Jim Starlin are in that group and everything. How are you handling? Please, I want to open it to questions. So I hope there are. Sir, right away.
So, Howard, you mentioned that the Clone Saga was supposed to be, I guess,
3 months.
years of stories.
I remember 5 months, but he has the notes.
I have the notes. and it was that whole 3 months, 4 books, 12 issues. Yeah.
When I guess marketing decided to expand it, is that when Dan was brought in? Like, was Dan always a part?
No, I think that, when did you start, Dan?
After I left.
Summer of '95, somewhere in there.
Yeah.
Is that it? Yeah. So, yeah, you guys were already into the story.
Yeah.
When I came in.
It was already treading water, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I don't remember the exact timing, but it would have been whenever. When did we launch?
Well, I do know this. When I came in, it was, this is all going to end in 6 months. That's what I was told, is that we had 6 months, we're going to wind it down, and Peter was going to die, and Ben Reilly was going to take over. So
That was the plan.
Yeah.
Yes.
And,
Wow.
I may even have my notes.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but that's what the plan was for at least a bit.
Yeah.
But I just don't know how that relates to when you guys started.
Yeah, I am sorry. I barely remember the characters that I wrote. It was
Actually, when we originally started, I think the end game was supposed to be that Peter was going to go off into the sunset with Mary Jane,
Yes.
and she was going to be pregnant. So
Right.
he was going to recognize that with great power comes great responsibility, and now it was to his
Okay.
wife and child, so that he could have a happy ending as well, and we wouldn't further piss off the fans that were all about Peter Parker. But I think you came on after I was off the book, so it might have
Yeah.
already graduated to Peter dying. I'm
I think
not
it
sure.
did.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say too, I was a huge fan of that Sensational Spider-Man that launched in the beginning.
Oh,
There you go, man.
You never got to finish the story there. Maybe at some point you will.
Never know. Never say never.
That's awesome. Sir.
Good
So, Gerry, I know you've been asked this a million times, Gwen Stacy. Just a couple of follow-ups. There's always speculation standing within Europe, and was this really coming from you? Did, in hindsight, you wish you didn't have that arc of 121, 122? And in hindsight, did you think that you kind of have that whole backlash 50 years later?
Well, I mean, the reality is Stan was involved. The premise of killing off a supporting character came from John Romita, who was the lead on the book until he left as penciler. His thought was going to, his particular background was an interest in newspaper strips, and he loved Terry and the Pirates, and he was always saying that the storytelling in that was terrific, and one of the ways that they would re-engage readers from time to time was to have a character die that would remind the readers that, yeah, this is a strip where things happen, and you should follow it. So his thought was, let's kill off a supporting character, and his idea was Aunt May. And at that time, I felt Aunt May was still extremely valuable to the book for story reasons and also thematically. But I had never liked Gwen Stacy. I mean, from the moment Mary Jane walked in, hey, face a tiger, you've hit the jackpot, I was sold. That was the character I wanted to write. And I saw, there was no really, I defy anybody to define Gwen Stacy prior to her death. She became important because she was dead. That's really what made her important. But Mary Jane had a fully developed personality that was interesting. And I thought she would be a much more fun character to write. So we pitched this idea to Stan and Roy, who was editor-in-chief, and Stan said, sure, fine. Stan's attitude once he left a book was he didn't give a crap. I mean, he wanted you to keep doing good stories, but he had no personal investment in this character, that character, except for the main character of the story. But when the book came out and there was feedback at the college campuses where he was going to give speeches, and all they would ask him was, why did you kill Gwen Stacy? He started to claim that he had been somewhere else. The idea that we would do something like that on the main title book and not ask the publisher if it was okay is ludicrous, but Stan sold that idea, and that's where that myth comes from. I really liked doing those two stories. I think we really nailed them. I liked doing them at the time. I was proud of them, and I was heavily traumatized by the convention pushback, that I received. I was a kid, I was like 20, 21 years old, so it hit me kind of hard, and I withdrew from it, and didn't really regret it so much as I really didn't enjoy the feedback. But now, 50 years later, people are still talking about it. I'm even more proud. So, yeah.
Absolutely. Real fast before I go back to questions, I always tell Gerry this. I was 9 and I read Death of Gwen Stacy and Marvel Tales, and I didn't go postal. It did make me, go in a bell tower and start shooting. All it did was explode explode my imagination. And it was like, wow, there are consequences in a story. And truly, man, that's probably one of the earliest comics. I was too young to read Tower comics with the characters of Wally Wood and those guys, Thunder Agents, and they killed off one of their heroes in that. This was the first one, and it's like, and it really, to this day, I think it's one of the most powerful Spider-Man stories. Just that fist and revenge and everything in Peter, and also that crack. And I even asked Gerry, and I'll real fast before we go back to questions, what, for the audience's purpose, did Peter's web catching Gwen, did that cause her to break the neck? Was she already dead when Peter tried to grab her? What was your thought?
Well, it's sort of interesting. This is one of those cases where you have a really collaborative, creative moment, because I had written an outline that I gave to Gil Kane, and in it I sort of whiffed on the cause of death by the classic cliche, the fall killed her, and Gil returned pencils that clearly show Mary Jane getting whiplash.
Gwen, of course, but it's
getting whiplash.
Trying to kill Mary Jane.
I know.
That's next year.
What's going on? And when I saw that, I thought, oh yeah, that makes sense. And I put in the sound effect. Now, it's kind of ambiguous. Was she dead when she was tossed? Did the neck crack kill her?
Yep.
For a long time I whiffed on that too, but I do think that Spidey's action killed her.
Wow.
But that was an attempt to grope towards realism, which is that heroes don't always succeed.
Right.
And the true measure of a hero is what do you do after you fail, because if you're always winning, you're really never challenged. But when you're defeated in such a massive way, and through your own actions, I think that speaks more to your heroic qualities.
All right, back to questions. I'm sorry. I'll get back to you guys. But yes, sir. You. Yeah.
I have a question for Terry. You mentioned earlier how one of the genesis for the Clone Saga was the writers writing a little bit too much of their personal lives into the character of Spider-Man. I'm wondering on the flip side of that, is there a character that you really felt like resonated with you that you could really just write in a way or put yourself in it in a way that was really positive?
The short answer is I don't think so, because I don't fight crime. So I really don't. I can't think of any. On some level, Peter Parker was someone, because we all have certain questions about our identity and guilt. We all have certain guilt by some point in our lives. So I think maybe Peter Parker would have been the closest.
Cool. Sir, with the glasses, yeah. Do you have glasses? No, you don't have glasses. Excuse me. I have glasses and I can't see you.
I appreciate that. I met all the gentlemen earlier today and yesterday, and there's a couple of questions I've had on my mind, and I've come a long way to ask. But getting more love these days from certain storylines more than 10, 20 years later, and even reading the comics these days, a lot of writers, you can tell, have read a lot of that stuff. Is that a good, positive feeling when you hear this from other fans? Is it a good thing for you thinking, actually, that turned out better than I thought? What are your thoughts on that?
For the group.
Go first. No.
Dan, you haven't said anything in a while.
If I understand your question correctly, I think that anytime you have a story that is fondly remembered, it's always flattering, because the whole idea is if you walk into your comic store every single week and you see how many new books come out on a weekly basis, and then you multiply that times 52 weeks a year times how many years, when your work is remembered and portions of it are, stay in print or are just brought up to you, I think it's always flattering. And especially sometimes if it's the stuff that you kind of almost thought was forgotten, because I don't know necessarily where all of you, I know where you date back to work-wise, but, there was a time when your book came out and it was never collected as a trade paperback or a hardcover or anything else. It lived on the stands for that 1 week probably, and that was it, with no thought it would be reprinted or seen again.
Agreed. Any other thoughts, guys? Or what,
For me, it probably was the Clone Saga because I was so vilified and took so much crap about that.
No,
For
not besides me. The vilification.
Other people.
Yeah. Oh,
Wait,
okay.
wait.
Yeah.
public vilified me. I had to change my identity and move.
Wait. No one told me this was therapy 101 today.
That's what I'm saying,
I had
man.
no idea.
It's actually
that-
couple counseling,
I
actually.
mean, my God.
But when it turned around, when you had the kids who grew up with Ben Reilly as their Spider-Man, and suddenly it was a popular storyline, and they come up to you at conventions and say, this was the Spider-Man I knew, and then they even revisited in Marvel Comics, and they made him into a hero and brought him back. That was rewarding, I have to admit that.
I mean, that is it. The payoff for us for the Clone Saga has come 20 some odd years later.
Yeah.
Because, and that's what I say, I get a lot of younger fans.
Yes.
And quite frankly, at my age, everybody's a younger fan, who come up and say exactly that. Ben Reilly was my Spider-Man. And that was the intent of the story. The intent was we were trying to write a story to the next generation of Spider-Man, potential Spider-Man fans. And it did exactly what it was supposed to do. I mean, and that really was your, and I'm going to stop joking around, but that was your vision for what we were trying to do then, to unencumber Spider-Man and to give the fans, not necessarily the readers who had been reading since Stan was writing it, but give the newer, younger fans an opportunity to jump on board. And so, and that was I do give you credit for that.
Please stop joking around. It's making me uncomfortable.
Yeah, I know. I love that.
CB Cebulski and I just had a panel earlier, and I brought up comic book deaths, and again, us older readers, we all roll our eyes, but it's like, no, for a kid, this could be the first time they ever saw something like that. And it's a kid is nodding his head. He agrees with me. That's good. And truly, man, and that's great. And Next Generation in Star Trek, they all got crap. It's not Kirk Spock. It happens. And certainly also in the Zeitgeist, guys, not only Ben Reilly, but Kyle Rayner and Connor Hawke at DC, legacy characters and stuff. You got to freshen it up every now and then, and also not take for granted the new readers that haven't been around for, 20 plus years or whatever. Sir, yes, sir.
That's just not true. Okay, go ahead.
Hey, he might listen to Word Balloon. It's possible, Howard, but I'm kidding.
With all the Spider-Man that you guys have written, is there anything that you ever got in an issue or in a story that you're like, I can't believe they let me put that in?
Oh, awesome.
Not that we're going to admit.
I think the statute of limitations is, a statute.
No, I can't think of anything in a Spider-Man story. I have done it elsewhere, and I'm not admitting to it. Not in public, because I think Tom DeFalco would still come after me. He was my boss at the time. But no, truthfully, I did also try to be. How many of us were editors? You and I were editor.
Jerry was
a longtime editor. I tried to be very. I was taught early on to be protective of the characters and of the audience that we had. So sometimes there would be people who did try to sneak things in. I don't know that it was always the writer necessarily. We've had some letterers try to get things in, and an artist put things in the background, things like that. But I still always had that editorial hat on in the back of my head, at least, and say, no, because honestly, I was always thinking of it as we were writing the material for a younger audience too. And I wanted to be very respectful for that, and I also didn't want it to get caught and for me to get fired. Well, because that's what I did once. So.
Hilarious. Real up front here, and please promote your podcast and everything for a second.
So Mark Giannacchio from Amazing Spider Talk. I've harassed most of you this weekend already. We had a conversation a while ago with Ron Friends, and he had mentioned that he connected with Spider-Man as a character so much that, like, he and DeFalco, when they were working out, they would refer to him as Pete, as if like, he was one of the guys. So, like, for each of you, or whoever wants to chime in, what is it about Peter, Spider-Man, that you find so relatable? Like, what is it about this character that just makes you connect to him in such a unique way that you would consider him a friend almost?
I found that when I was writing Spider-Man, and this was a problem for me for a while, and I think at one point, because I took on too much work at one point, too early in my career, and at one point I was writing Spider-Man, it was Web, and I had just, Ghost Rider had just taken off, so I had character Dan Ketch. And then I was doing something for Terry, a Havoc. Marvel Comics Presents.
The weekly?
Feature with Havoc.
yeah.
And I remember at one
And then
point.
Ghost Rider there as well.
Dan Ketch, Ghost Rider. Yeah. And so, and then I got the books in, and I rarely reread my work after it's printed. And I read them and I realized suddenly Peter, Dan, and Havoc, Alex Summers, all sounded the same.
Ooh.
And they sounded like me.
I remember you saying that to me,
and
actually. You were concerned.
Yeah, and I realized, and that's not a good thing for a writer. And they all had my voice. And I think, honestly, as much as there's a lot of Dan Ketch in, there's a lot of me and Dan Ketch, I identified more to not necessarily Peter's voice, but Spider-Man's voice, the kind of rapid, just, insult your friends and your enemies alike. And so what I did was I quit Web of Spider-Man. That's why I left Web of Spider-Man. And of course, just 6 months later, I got a phone call from Danny Fingeroth, who was the editor, saying, "Hey, Howard, Todd McFarlane's off adjectiveless Spider-Man. Do you want to take that on?" And I said, "Did you think the problem was the adjective?" And then, of course, I took it. But I think I felt a little bit more confident in my ability to discern and separate the voices a little bit at that time.
I remember that conversation with you, and it was very real for you.
Oh, yeah.
It was disturbing for me because after that, every time I read those characters, I heard them in a Brooklyn accent. And when you said they were in your voice, that messed me up for a while, too.
I have not had my Brooklyn accent in many, many years.
You had it then.
When I was writing Spider-Man, I was literally the same age as Peter Parker, so at least the first run. So his problems were my problems. I didn't have a girlfriend fall off a bridge, but I had all the same issues about apartments, about jobs, insecurity, sick parents. I mean, everything was Peter Parker. So I had grown up with the character, the first issue came out around the same time that I started reading Marvel. So I was very much, that voice was my voice and vice versa. So I had really identified with Peter.
Any thoughts, Dan? Or
No, I just
Okay.
think it is, and Gerry touched on it. I think it's about the struggle because that's what life is for most people. And I joked earlier about Spider-Man having to get a bottle of medicine or pills or whatever home to Aunt May as he was fighting the Green Goblin. But that's everyone's struggle, right? And I think that's what made Marvel characters. Yes, it's what made Marvel characters so much different from DC characters
Absolutely.
at that time. And it's what made Peter, I think, that magnet of all those characters is that for him it was much more demonstrative than most.
Got it. Absolutely. The gentleman holding a camera that's got his hand raised. Yes, sir.
Who was your favorite guest character to write?
Good question. Your favorite guest star in the book?
Yes,
Oh.
Guest hero, I'm assuming, or anything? Guest hero. Ooh, I like this. You've stumped the panel, sir.
Yeah.
We have a lovely parting gift for you.
I wrote Spider-Man on and off for about 10 years, I realized. And so in that time, I did a lot of guest appearances. And I'm trying to, I think it's the only time I got to write Daredevil.
Oh.
And so that was fun for me. I kind of, along lines of what Gerry was saying, I always preferred the more street level
Sure.
villains. I always thought it was a problem as we got Spider-Man going up against bigger and stronger characters that meant you couldn't have him go back. How does he face off against Galactus and then go up against the Kingpin? And
Sure.
So whenever possible, I tried to feature those kind of characters. So I'm going to go with, if we're going hero, it would definitely be Daredevil. But then I also loved being able to grab a hold of some of the villains too. And I got to write the Trapster, who I still think of as Paste Pot
Pete, absolutely.
And
man.
I just had a blast doing that. Just trying to find something new with the character to bring him to a different level. So
Funny.
For me, it might have been Iron Fist.
Cool.
Guest starred in a Spider-Man couple of issues that I did. And I can't really explain why. I didn't particularly identify with Danny Rand or Iron Fist, but it came from a period of my fandom that I really appreciated and enjoyed. So it was a privilege for me to be able to write him into a story.
For me, it was Johnny Storm, because he and Peter, at least at that early stage, were like these bros who had this rivalry friendship, and they were kind of dicks to each other.
Yes.
And I liked that. I mean, that reminded me of the friends that I had in the business. It's like, well, I roomed with some of them, but it was a lot of fun. I mean, that kind of camaraderie, workplace camaraderie, and just male rivalry that was fun.
Awesome. Dan, do you have a favorite guest star?
Well, I would only find it as a reader because I don't think I wrote any guest stars for my very limited run. And I always did get a kick out of the Johnny Storm issues, and I always thought there was something sort of magic about Spider-Man and Captain America in the same room together.
Yes.
Because Spider-Man became somewhat deferential, I think, to Cap in that
100%.
moment. And that was always kind of cool.
Yes, absolutely. Did Spidey make it in your Cap run?
No, he did not.
Okay.
No.
Because I love, and Gerry, God, everyone. Were you the first to put Johnny and Peter together?
No, they were actually. That actually goes back to to Spider-Man #1.
No, yes, when Spider-Man was going to join.
Then it just sort of happened. The first time that I actually got to write Spider-Man was in Marvel Team Up. And I think one of the I think the original premise was Spider-Man and the Human Torch.
Wow.
So, it was just going to be an ongoing thing.
Right.
The first 2-3 issues. And I just like that dynamic. Yeah.
Absolutely, man. No, and as subsequent creators had put Johnny and Peter together, I completely agree. Yes?
Steve, there's been a bunch of live-action movies. What's a villain that y'all wrote that hasn't been a live-action that y'all would love to see it now?
Ooh, villain that you wrote that you'd like to see in a live-action movie.
Me personally, I'd like to see Tombstone.
Cool. I believe in the Miles Morales sequel, Tombstone's going to be in it. I believe.
Which one?
They're making a second Into the Spider-Verse with Miles, and I heard Tombstone is going to. Yeah, sadly not live action, but at least he's those. Hey man, the first one, the first cartoon movie won an Oscar, so Dan, any villains you want to see?
No, because I always thought Mysterio would be great, and they finally got around to it, so that worked out. Yeah.
Yes, it did. Absolutely. Terry?
I can't think of one in particular, honestly.
No worries.
I'd love to see the Clone Saga story done.
Wait, is the Clone Saga a villain?
No, done the way we wanted, featuring
The Jackal in it?
the Jackal
Sure.
in it. So,
Sure.
yes.
Jackal, okay.
Yeah.
All right, Spider-Punk, you've got a question.
If you have full creative freedom, have Spider-Man do whatever you want, what story would you tell?
I love and forgive me, but I love that there's a woman underneath Spider-Punk. That's fantastic. Outstanding.
You never get full creative freedom when you're working for a big corporation like Marvel is attached to now. I got nothing.
I would retell the Clone Saga in the short way we were supposed to do it in the first place. That's what I would do, what he said.
When I was doing the book, if you all remember the burglar that is quite integral to Spider-Man's story, that killed Uncle Ben, I introduced a daughter for him. And I always had some places I wanted to take that particular combination that is still sitting in my folder of untold stories, and that I'd like to play around with that one day.
Please, with the Neil Gaiman hair, please. That's you, sir. The brunette with the big hair. That's you, man.
I actually have two questions here. How difficult is it for writers to switch from one Spidey universe to another? And how difficult is it to differentiate your Spidey from Spidey of the past and from different Marvel media sources?
So Spider-Man's from one universe to the other. You mean like like Miles being from the Ultimate Universe, that kind of thing?
Yeah, kind of, yeah.
And I'm sorry, could you repeat, guys? Did you hear the question? See if you could speak up a little bit better, buddy.
How difficult is it to differentiate your Spideys from Spideys of the past and
Okay.
different Marvel media sources?
Okay, how would you guys differentiate your Spider-Man from versions from the past, and then also including the cartoons and the movies? Do you feel there's a difference in terms of writing?
I think it's natural. It happens when you have a different writer stepping to the keyboard. Your interior voice coming through the character is just going to make them different automatically. My version of Spider-Man is definitely going to be different than Terry's, than Dan's, or than Gerry's, and it's important to. I had my take on continuity, and a lot of that comes from not everything that's come from the past, was to be very aware of the continuity, but not to be a slave to it. And if I spent my time writing my Spider-Man stories and trying to create the voice of Stan or Gerry or whoever did it before me, it would, I believe, fall flat, and I would still be at the keyboard on the first issue because I would never have gotten it right. So that was my approach.
That said, though, our job was to not differentiate our version of Spider-Man from the previous one.
Consistency.
As much as possible
Yes.
To keep it going, but it would be a natural. It's going to happen
Yeah.
anyway. And when it comes to the cartoons and the movies and the TV shows, I think they do a pretty good job of capturing the core of Spider-Man that I think of as being the core of Spider-Man. I can't speak for these guys.
You're right.
Jerry, when you took over, it was kind of recent to Stan's run.
Well, yeah, exactly.
Well, there you go. So was there an edict to maintain the voice?
I think it was understood, that it shouldn't feel like a totally different book, And
Sure.
as I said, I was sort of being mentored by John Romita during that period, but my voice is my voice. And
Sure.
it's just going to happen. I loved writing Spider-Man because I could hear how that character would talk, but my word choices and my pacing of that is going to be different from Stan's,
Absolutely.
inevitably. But I tried to make it seem like it was Stan's.
Yes, sir.
I want this for Gerry. I wanted to ask, as you lived another life as a screenwriter for TV and long
Yeah.
that stuff, did you ever have any situations where someone would learn about your background as a writer for Spider-Man and they would react in certain ways, or then they want to ask you questions like, what really happened with Gwen?
Well,
and things like that?
it's sort of interesting. I had a 20-odd year career doing film and then TV. And when Roy Thomas and I started out writing films back in the late 70s, we had to hide the fact that we had written comic books, or at least downplay it enough so that they didn't think we were idiots, incapable of writing serious stuff. And then by the end of my career, we became exactly that, where, oh, you wrote, yeah, do you know Stan Lee? Yeah, I know Stan. So it was a weird contextual period, because originally the people that I worked for had grown up thinking of comic books as junk. And then by the time I was ending my career, the people that I worked for had grown up reading my comics, so it was a very different environment. And a lot of times, it was just more like conversation, just and most of it was, do you know Stan? So.
I don't know, Dan, if you wanted to add to that, or
No.
Okay, Gerry, I wanted to follow up on that because when you came back to comics after writing so much TV and film, did you take any storytelling skills that you had learned from TV and film?
Sure.
Because it's a pleasure to read your current stuff as well as the classic stuff, and also watch your TV and films.
I think I learned how to be a much better structuralist, in writing TV, because it's a very structured
Absolutely.
format. And I think I also, because comics in general had become less bombastic. My writing is much less bombastic than it was when I was writing in the early 70s,
Sure.
when everybody had to shout at the top of their
Absolutely,
lungs.
yeah. All the word balloons had exclamation points. Every sentence would
it
end
was
with
more
an exclamation.
conversational, And
Absolutely.
that's again something that I had to be trained in writing television.
Natural dialogue, absolutely, man. No, I can see that. All right, we have time only for one more question, and yeah, all right. Yeah, actually, I'm going to give it to I'm going to give it to a kid behind you. I'm sorry. But seriously, go up to their tables. They're all going to be here all weekend.
Yeah.
So seriously, I'm so sorry, man. We're running out of time. I apologize. Please. Yeah.
It's more specifically for Gerry Conway, but you talked a little bit at the beginning about Mary Jane Watson, and she's my favorite Marvel character. A lot of that is because of the stuff you did with her, and I wanted to ask what attributed her, because she captivated me from that first canon in the same way.
Well, I mean, I very superficially, it was her introduction by John Romita, that classic picture. But I also just felt that she as a character had this dual aspect similar to Peter's, which was the presentation that she made to the world as Mary Jane is similar to Peter's presentation as Spider-Man. Very much a high energy, high vibration personality. And just judging by the women that I had known, the girls at my teenage, because I was barely out of teenage years, I knew that those girls who presented that way were actually, either shy or had some interior stuff going on that made them have to perform. And I thought that was a cool duality to her that would work well with Peter. Gwen was just too well adjusted, and she just seemed like a happy woman who had no problems, which is not an interesting character to write. But Mary Jane, there was this hint that there was something wrong.
Yeah.
And I thought, eventually I wrote a graphic novel about that, Parallel Lives, in which we got into the whole what was wrong.
Yeah.
And it was a lot. So.
Absolutely. Real fast, quick comment. The reason why we're all here is because of the body of work these people have done. And Dan always points out it was a very brief Spider Clone run, but his body of work in the Marvel Universe, in the DC Universe, speaks for itself. And I'm so sorry we didn't be able to get to all the questions. Obviously, they're tables. They're here all weekend. I urge you to go up and talk to them. But I will thank you for the audience, and I'm sure they'll agree, for the body of work you've all done.
Hi, this is Maisie Richardson-Sellers, and you are watching Fandom Spotlight. Be a legend and hit that like button, and most importantly, have fun and follow your fandom.